Hello students, I welcome you all in this new video where we are going to start the revision of the first chapter, that is the fundamental unit of life, cell, because very soon your periodic test is going to be start. So we will discuss a short look of the whole chapter so that you can attempt the questions effortlessly. So let's start the first chapter, the fundamental unit of life, cell. As you know, in the beginning itself, in your early childhood, it was told to you that all the things present in your surrounding, they can be classified broadly in two categories. The first one is what? Living, and the other one is known as what? Non-living, on the basis of a few characteristics present in them. As you know that living are the substances or the things which can show the growth, that is internal, means they are going to increase in their mass, in their size internally due to the cell division. And when we talk about the metabolic activities like nutrition process or respiration process, so these are the characteristics, features which are going to present in the living organisms, and that's why they are also told that living organisms are having life in them. So when we see that livings are having what? Life in them, and this is what? Why? Because of the characteristic features present in them, like metabolic activities, and growth and reproduction, all these processes which are going to make them considered as the living substances or the living organisms. So when we see about the living things in our surrounding, we are going to see a variation in living being. So when we are going to observe all the living beings present in our surrounding, we are going to see some huge organisms, like you are aware about the blue whales, aquatic large organisms, or elephants, giraffe, terrestrial huge organisms, as well as at the same time you are having also a knowledge about the microbes present in our surrounding. So when we are going to see all of these organisms, all of these living beings simultaneously, then we are going to observe that one thing is very common in all these living beings, and that common thing is what? That common thing is the cell. Actually, what is cell? It is the structural and functional unit of life. So since living beings contain life because they are having some characteristics like metabolic activities, growth, reproduction, consciousness, means they are having an ability to sense their surroundings. That's why they are considered as living and they are having life. And when we are going to see how these living beings are formed, what is the structural unit, the smallest part which is going to create their body, then we are going to examine that the smallest structural part is what? Cell. So whether the living being is microbe or the blue whale or the human beings or any of the living organism, they all are made up of the smallest unit, that is known as what? Cell, and that's why it is known as a structural unit. When we talk about why it is considered as the functional unit, then you are having an idea that as a whole body, because we are multicellular organisms, in our body multiple cells are arranged there, and finally it is going to make our body. So as a whole body, when we are going to perform respiration process or nutrition process, the same processes are performed by the cell itself, and that's why the cells are considered a functional unit of life. Now we will see the discovery of cell, that how the cells were discovered by our scientists. So the next topic is discovery of cell. So before we start discussing the discovery of cell, actually it was possible because of an invention of an instrument that is known as what? Compound microscope. Compound microscope. So we will discuss about what are these compound microscope, but it was built in late 16th century, in the year 1595, and due to the invention of this instrument, the discovery of cell was possible. So there was a scientist named Robert Hooke in the year 1665. So this scientist was studying the cork cell, a thin slice of cork cell. In 1665, he was observing cork cell under his own microscope, and he observed the cork cell structure like the honeycomb microscope, and observed the structure like honeycomb. So you all are having an idea that honeycomb, little chambers, small room like structures are present there. So these honeycomb structures were like little room, and so the scientist coined the word cell, because in Latin the cell means little room. So that was the discovery of cell, Robert Hooke in 1665, and what he was doing there, actually he was observing the cork cell. In previous video we were discussing about the chapter 2, tissues, where we have seen that cork is what? The outermost layer of the dicot stems plants, which is also known as what? Bark, or when we talk about in Hindi, it is known as what? Chhal. So this cork was used in the ancient time to close the lid of bottles. Perhaps you have also seen that if we are having some bottles, some jars, so their mouth were closed by the cork, and these corks were obtained from the plant. So he was having what? A thin slice of this cork, and he was observing the cork under his own microscope, and then he observed the honeycomb like structure, and that's why he coined the word cell, because in Latin cell meaning little room. But this was the discovery of what? Dead cells. Dead cell, because you know cork cell is what? It is dead cell in plants. But when we talk about the discovery of living cell, another scientist named as Anthony von Leeuwenhoek in the year 1674, he discovered the living cell for the first time, living cell for the first time in pond water. So that was the discovery of cell, means Robert Hooke, the first scientist in the year 1665, who discovered the cell for the first time with his own microscope, and the cells were what? Of Cork Cell. Since at that time he were examining the structure of cell inside the under the own microscope, so at that time technology was not improved, so he was observing only what? The structure like small room and nothing else. But when Antony von Leeuwenhoek he was observing, he observed the living cell for the first time in pond water, and in the year 1674. So Antony von Leeuwenhoek discovered the living cell for the first time, and Robert Hooke discovered the dead cell for the first time. Now we will discuss about what do we mean by cytology. Means the word is what? Cytology. So cytology is the branch of science which deals with the study of which deals with the study of cell, and this cytology is also known as what? Cell biology. So now we will see what are the three basic structures, that a typical cell contains. A typical cell contains. So as you are having a knowledge from your previous class, that the first one is what? Known as cell membrane. So it is the outermost layer of the cell that is going to separate the external environment with the internal environment of the cell. The second one is known as what? Cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the liquid part, the fluid part of the cell, which enables it to perform all the metabolic activities and helps in the transport of substances and excretion or absorption processes. And finally, the last one is what? The last one is known as nucleus, or we can say it the genetic material in case of prokaryotic cells, because they lack the nucleus, so they are having genetic materials embedded in the cytoplasm. So these three structures are common in all cells. The typical cell contains these three structures. Now we will see what is the cell theory. So the two scientists named as Theodor Jacob Schleiden and Matthias Jacob Schleiden and Theodor Sohn. These two scientists proposed a theory that is known as cell theory, based on their studies on the cell, and they proposed that all living organisms are made up of cells. These cells are the structural and functional unit of life. And finally, one more statement is added here by a scientist named as Rudolf Virchow. He added a statement, a postulate that is known as what? All cells arise from pre-existing cells. It means when the cells are going to divide themselves, so the new cells will arise. So these postulates are known as what? Cell theory, and basically Schleiden and Swan is considered as they are considered to propose the cell theory. Now we will consider that what do we mean by microscope. So actually microscope is what? It is an instrument used to see very small objects, because microscope is going to enlarge the image of any of the object or subject that are placed under it. And these microscopes are of two types. The first one is known as light microscope and the other one is known as electron microscope. So from the name itself you can get an idea that light microscope uses sunlight and this electron microscope uses the beam of electron. So this light microscope is also of two types. The first one is simple and the other one is known as compound microscope. So in simple microscope, simple light microscope, you can get an idea that only one lens is there, the convex lens, which is also known as converging lens. And when we consider about the compound microscope, in this microscope multiple lenses will be used, and the enlargement size when we are going to see, so the compound microscope can enlarge the image thousands of the time. When we talk about the electron microscope, it can enlarge the image of any object to 1 to 5 lakh times. It can enlarge the image of any small object which we are willing to see what are their structures, and that's why these microscopes are going to use nowadays, so that we can have an idea about all the microorganisms present in our surrounding. Still a lot of microbes we have to still search about them, but these microscopes are giving an idea what are the living beings which are present in our surrounding. Now we will see what are the organisms which are called on the basis of the cell number. On the basis of cell number, organisms may be of two types. The first one is known as unicellular and the other one is known as multicellular. So unicellular organisms are made up of a single cell, as you are having an idea that all the protozoans, means amoeba, paramecium and all these prokaryotes like bacteria, they are made up of only single cell. So they are considered as unicellular organisms. And when we consider about the multicellular organisms, so all the organisms you can see by your eyes, they all are what? Multicellular. All the plants in your surrounding, all the animals which you can see by your eyes, they all are of multicellular organisms. And one more category is there of the cells, that is what? prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell, which you are also having the previous knowledge that what do we mean by prokaryotic cell. Means the cells which are primitive in nature and they are lacking the nucleus from them, so they are considered as the prokaryotic cell. And when we consider about the eukaryotic cells, eukaryotic, eu means what, with, and karyote means what, nucleus. So all the cells which contain true nucleus with them, they are considered as what, eukaryotic cells or eukaryotic organisms. And when we see about the shape of the cell, we can see that a number of variety of shapes are present in the cell on the basis of the functions they are going to perform. You are having an idea about the amoeba, which is having no particular shape, a specific shape. It can change its shape and it can create the false feet known as pseudopodia in any of the direction it want to move or it want to make it. And when we consider about our body, you are having an idea that nerve cell, they are elongated in structure. Even sperm cell, they are having tail in them. And when we consider about the muscular cell, means muscle cell, they are spindle shaped structure. When we consider about the striated muscle cell, so it means what, the cells are of variety, means they are having the shapes on the basis of or the according of their functions they are going to perform. So that was all from the today's topic, where we have discussed about what do we mean by cell. Cell is considered as structural and functional unit of life. What is cell theory? Discovery of cell, means Robert Hooke, he coined the term cell and he is the discoverer of cell for the first time. But when we consider about who discovered the living cell, then you know Antony von Leeuwenhoek is the person who discovered the living cell for the first time and in pond water. And when we consider about the microscope, means microscope is what? It is an instrument which is used to enlarge the size of any object, and it is of two types, light microscope and electron microscope. When we consider about the light microscope, again it is divided into two categories, the simple and compound on the basis of lenses used in it. And these simple and compound light microscope uses sunlight for the illumination purpose. But when we consider about the electron microscope, here beam of electrons are used for the illuminant or the illumination purpose. So that was all. We will discuss about the next topic in the next video. Till then, take care of yourself, be safe and keep studying.